morning, everyone. My name is Fiu Chan. Welcome to the third episode of Integrative Conversations. I'm streaming live from Brisbane, Australia. I would like to welcome all our listeners from all over the globe, from the United States of America, from the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, within Australia and the Pacific. Welcome and thank you all for your support. Without your support, these conversations or these narratives will not be able to be shared in our communities back home as well as throughout the globe. So thank you. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the Guanamuka ancestors and elders for which this event is taking place. I also thank my families and my friends and all my Facebook friends and all the communities out there for allowing me to be sharing some of my stories. And so yesterday, which is the 8th of March, marks the International Women's Day. Today also is celebrated in the United States, Canada, and some parts of the world. And I also like to pay tribute to the women of the past generations, present generations, and emerging young women, young and elderly, past and present, who have in their voices have paved way for all the amazing and all the struggles and all the achievements that we are growing and we have experienced in our lives. And I wanted to bring you back to some of my early work with the with some of the with one of the grassroots movement back in Fiji, and this was way back in 1980s. So the center is called the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and I wanted to take us back to that time because I feel that it's also important to know some parts of my story, but also for me to be able to share what some of the achievements and all the struggles that we have come through as women from not just parts of the Pacific, but all over the world. Thank you so much, Amber, Vicky, Larissa. Thank you, Tracy, Wilson. Thank you to all my beautiful friends who are women, who are empowering and encouraging each and every one of us to be strong, and for community to hear our voices and our stories, because it makes a huge difference to someone's life. And so I'm sorry, I'm just going forward and backward, but I guess when I'm nervous, it just hits you, but it is fine. And so going back in the 1980s, when I started as a young mother who was part of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center and its collective, and I see the hardships and all but I also see the beauty of starting small and starting from a grassroots perspective, and how that grassroots perspective have made and with their pioneering work have made an impact all over, not just in the Pacific but globally. And so back in the days when I was volunteering, and the coordinator's name is Shamima Ali. Thank you, Shamima, for doing all the work and all your team. But also looking at all of, how when we started small, we all volunteer, but when we are working in a collective environment, we have common grounds and common goals that we needed to achieve. And why the center is set up is because of the outcry for the number of the violence against women and children out into the community, and there's no safety networks. Although we have our traditional groups and our our church groups and our religious, our other religious affiliations there, that people are making some in keeping children and women safe, but there's no collective efforts to, and I also acknowledge the work of the police and the government, but there's no collective effort to specifically have places like that set up for women and children who are facing violence, not just physical violence, but sexual abuse as well. And so the collective at that time in the 1980s were, funding was very difficult. We have to look for private and public funds are hard to come by. So the early 80s, we are just depending on people, private partnerships, and public who are willing to help and support, fund some of the efforts and the programs set up by the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. And so I was a woman, I was someone who was volunteering at that time, but my passion is in there, and I get to to not only change how I see things, but I know that it's the impact of violence against me and my siblings, and not just me and my siblings growing up in the islands, but so is my mother, and so is my grand. Were my grandmothers, past and present, and we have a traditional system for safety, but that traditional system is not powered through by legislative processes. And I know that there's a way of, and whenever there's violence within the family, we always have to, my mother used to, we remove her from the house to a safe place in another village, but that's not safe for her as well, because there's always this reconciliation methods, and that's put in place. And so although we have police in the island who come by and who try to be supportive, but it's not as strong, or I should say it makes a very little impact on the safety of my mom and for other women in the villages. So we keep going back to the traditional ways of reconciliation, but we're not even looking at the core of the problem. And acknowledge that I have a father who is being violent, but it's not, and sometimes I have this anger towards him, but as I grew over the years, my anger has changed to sadness, because it's not him as the person, but it's what he's doing that's hurting my mom and us as children. And so going back to the crisis center, the first funders that have come through and have made huge changes is the Australian aid, the government that has put aid in the Pacific to help, because one of the reasons why they supported the work of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center is because it's a developing, violence is a developing issue, and violence it needs to be addressed not just from the grassroots level, but also from the local government, and also globally, which we are doing at the moment. But funding is hard to go by then, and we continue to work, we get trained, and through the center is that came about radical changes in terms of training, professional training for counselors, which takes us from three months and ongoing. But we also have to have a framework that we needed to work within, so that we can help women come forward and help communities come forward to tell their story, but also lobbied for law reforms at the time. And from the early 80s, way back into forwards into the 1990s, the centers have grown from Fiji to all over, most parts of the Pacific Islands, where Fiji is the umbrella umbrella for the gender violence against women and children. And so in the late 1990s, there has been a huge law reform within Fiji government, and changes in people's and also community attitudes towards family violence. And a lot of us during my work, a lot of the communities would approach me and say, oh, if you why you guys we support what you do, but why are you guys bringing in all these um, foreign ways of doing things? Like, why is it the center is based on a feminist framework? um, and I said, look, we have to have a framework to start with, but we also have sisters globally who are supporting the work of the center so that we can make changes within the society. And I know that the Pacific, we have a hierarchical structure that we have to go through, and it's a chiefly system. And women's voices, although are heard and recognized, there is a huge gap, and that there is a huge divide in terms of gender disparity. And so I would say and when we would go out into the communities, I would say to the community, because of the misconception of the feminist framework and theories, our conversation is around, how do you see things if things are done our way, our normal way of doing things? How do you see change? Do you see change happen, or do you see change not happen? Positive change, not negative change. And some of our village elder women and men would say, if we see things from a different perspective, perhaps what we can do is integrate the feminist perspective into the policy makers and all that, but also not work against the government, but work alongside the government so that we can build robust safety nets for women and children and communities as a whole. And so the conversations in the villages, about all this feminist way of doing things started to change, because people stop having, a lot of people do have this misconception about the whole thing. But Fiji and the Pacific is not working in isolation on its own. We are now, like what my mentor said, Vicky, we are not, when the pandemic hit, we are not no longer in countries. Yes, we are in countries, but we are now in one globe, one world. So whatever affects other parts of the world affects also us. And so my message is that no matter what we do, we must wake up and celebrate with women, and not just women all over, because it's a special day for us, but celebrate the big win, the small wins and the big win. And so what I need to say is that this has, from my work with from the humble beginnings of the crisis, and has taken me from the Pacific to live in New Zealand and in Australia, and the work continues. Not only in Fiji, but the work continues, and it cuts across all throughout the globe. The stronger we work as a collective, the better we are to make life better, and put women's voices and young children's voices on the platform. And so when I'm sorry, I needed to retract my conversation, but also what I've seen in the growth of the grassroots movement is that OSA decided to fund the crisis center for 27 years because of the impact, of the huge impact it has done in the Pacific, in Asia, in terms of sexual violence, in terms of working with prostitution, in terms of working with working with all areas of the Asia Pacific region, and also working collaboratively with some parts of, I mean, with women globally. And so thank you so much for watching this. I knew this is very short, but I wanted to share with you some of the achievements and why we needed to keep supporting the grassroots movement from the community, and also bringing and raising and giving voices to those women, young children who have dreams in the community to come forward into the global platform to share their stories. And one of the books that I'm reading at the moment, it's called the She Myth, and it's written by two of my coaches, Tracy Wilson and Vicky Helm. But it also talks about some of the issues and some of the limiting beliefs that we women face as children growing up, and it touches in all areas of our career field. And I wanted to tell you this has really helped me with my journey, not only my mothers, my elders, and all the women that I acknowledge back in the days, but in the 21st century, we women are moving forward. But I wanted to show you this valuable book. It has really changed, transform some of my limiting beliefs that I have with me. And I hope, and please, International Women's Day, if you are interested to, please go on to Amazon, and purchase it. If you don't want to buy the paperback, please, the ebook costs 99 cents, but it talks a lot about women in leadership as well. And what I'm grateful for is that it has given me valuable insights into how I can help myself and how I can help others change the way we think and the way we feel, and to align our positive thoughts uh, into our hearts, so that we can we can transform our lives, and also we can leave legacies for our generations to come. And thank you so much for all the wonderful lessons, and thank you so much for all the celebrations out there to mark International Women's Day. Collectively, I said, we can make huge changes to women's lives and children's lives. Thank you also for watching this episode and all your support given to me. And I leave you with a positive message that this show, changing lives, one show at a time. Thank you so much.